All right, thank you so much for joining us for this Renewals Update webinar. This update is an addendum to the Renewals training that we gave in late 2017, and thank you so much for joining us. So as I just mentioned, we released a training module that focused on renewals, and it was a mandatory module for all of our community partners. And we have some new information. The information from that module is still more or less correct, and it still applies, but we have more information. And we're going to talk specifically about three things today. We're going to talk about active versus passive renewals, and these are new phrases for us and for you. We're also going to talk about the 90-day reconsideration period, and we're going to briefly touch on reinstatement and reactivation and what all of these terms mean. So this new renewal process is one in which the one system will use the information available on a case, and at the time of renewal, it will try to re-verify that information using an automated process as opposed to a manual process. If this is not successful, which is usually going to be because of something to do with the client's case status or if an error pops up, this may be moved to what is going to be called an active renewal. If we are able to re-verify, or if we receive a pen for verification, then this is a successful passive renewal. Active renewal may sound familiar because it's the old usual way of doing renewals, the one that we trained you on. So an OHP member is sent a renewal packet. They then must complete the paperwork either using the paper or using the one system. And this was the main renewal process until December 2017, when this new process that we're about to go into went into effect. As a note, a case summary has been sent with active renewals in the past and will continue to be sent with active renewals. It just looks a little different from what it looked like in the past, and we'll go over that. Here's an example of what an active renewal would look like in one. You'll see there's a renew button. If you press that button, you'll go through the renewal process to help an OHP member renew. Passive renewals are new, and they're that automated review process that I just touched upon. So one checks its databases, and it will attempt to renew these households seamlessly without worker intervention or without the clients having to interact with the system. No renewal packet will be needed if a passive renewal is successful. And there are three different paths that we're going to talk about, which is they may get a passive renewal approval, they may get a passive renewal request for information, and there is also a chance of a close of benefits. We'll go into all of these. So if the system can verify a household and verify that it appears that those members continue to be eligible, then one will process the renewal and send two documents. It will send a notice of eligibility, and it will also send a case summary. These documents will come together in an envelope, but they will look like two different documents in the one system message center. If the information on these documents looks correct, then that means that the household has been successfully renewed and they don't have to do anything else to keep their coverage for the next year. If the information does not look correct, then the OHP member must report a change and get the correct information to us. And they can do that either through the one system, by calling in, or by faxing or mailing something. If the system can verify that household members continue to likely be eligible but requires verification, which is also just to say if there is any pen, and that includes hard and soft pens, we'll process the renewal and send three documents. They'll send a case summary, and the case summary will always be sent with a renewal. It will send requests for information for whatever documents we need to verify information, and a notice of eligibility as well. If these pens are any pens that are not citizenship or immigration pens, then that notice of eligibility would not be sent until after the request for information has been fully processed. So they'll get those first two documents, and then we will get the information for that request for information, process it, and then send the notice of eligibility. If it's a soft pen, which is a citizenship or immigration pen, then you might get that notice of eligibility right up front with those other two documents. As a note, Household benefits will close if a member does not respond to the RFI by the due date that is listed. And another note, if any information doesn't look correct, regardless of whether it has a append attached to it or not, then this is also an opportunity to report a change in order to get that updated. In rare cases, some members may be found ineligible during a passive renewal. As a note, that notice of eligibility will have either an approval or a denial, a closure of notice, closure of benefits. So that case summary will still be sent. The notice of eligibility will mention that coverage will close. And this is not going to happen very often. One example is if someone is aging out of a program. If there's anything that we need to verify with documents, they will not get a closure until after those documents have been processed. So now that we've talked about the different paths that people may take when they're renewing, we're going to quickly go over what those new correspondences look like and those official form numbers. So the passive renewal notice of eligibility is also known as OHP 048. And there's also a passive renewal request for information, which is OHP 049. And that case summary document, OHP 047, will always be sent with other renewal documents. So you should never see it on its own. You may see it look like it's on its own in the one system, but there should be another document that has either the passive renewal or the active renewal information alongside. Here is what the passive renewal notice of eligibility looks like. This is an example that doesn't have any specific case information. As a note, you'll see that the case summary is mentioned in this document, and also that people do have to read through this to see what that notice of eligibility is. And this initial part of it doesn't actually include information, all the information on this case. So make sure that people read all the way through this. Here's an example of what that passive renewal request for information would look like. It'll say, we need more proof of information at the top, and then it will have some generic information, which you see here, and then the specifics of what information we need will be listed underneath. And the case summary itself will look something like this. This is an example with just the basic information from the application. So for example, this has two people, their information is listed here. If any of this were to look incorrect or that it needs to be updated, this is when people must report a change. So now we've talked about the basics, the very basics of what a passive renewal is and how it relates to the active renewal process, which is the new name for renewing as we have always done it in the past. I'm going to also quickly talk about the 90-day reconsideration period, and that is 90 days that happens as soon as someone's case closes. So that's as soon as the deadline has passed for a renewal or that RFI, depending on whether it is a passive or active renewal. So the day after someone is due to respond, the case will become discontinued or inactive. Benefits do not end at that time. They don't end until the last day of the month of their renewal date. That's when that 90-day reconsideration period starts, and people can actually reactivate their case without sending in a new application during those 90 days. As a note, this is only for renewals and not for new applications. So people who have not responded to an RFI for a new application do not have that same 90 days after the due date. If an OHP member turns in their renewal paperwork, which either is all of that paperwork that we're used to seeing or just an RFI if it's a passive renewal, and they do that between the renewal due date and the date that benefits are set to end, they can still renew via paper or in the one system. If they are found to be eligible, there's a good chance they'll avoid a gap in coverage as long as they do this before benefits are set to end. But that is not a guarantee. Of course, it is always best for people to renew well before the due date. Another phrase, so reinstatement and reactivation, these are really internal to our workers, but this is also useful for you to hear because you may hear this coming from our outreach staff. If an OHP member has turned in their renewal or RFI after the dates that benefits have ended, but before that 90-day reconsideration period ends, then we can still process renewal paperwork. We can still process RFIs. However, you can't do that in the one system. That will be turned off for applicant portal. So we can still do it on the worker portal side of the one system, which is why we can still accept paperwork and faxing and mailing. If people are found to be eligible, there is a potential gap in coverage. You can request retroactive coverage to avoid that gap. Say if someone, their benefits ended at the end of December, but they don't turn in their renewal paperwork until let's say, midway through February. There will also be a gap in CCO coverage, and we cannot retro that the same way we can retro OHP coverage. One last note about renewals is that if at any point in time during this process someone is found to be ineligible, a notice of eligibility will be sent with a closure date. So a lot of the examples we just gave were for people who are continuing to be eligible. There's always a chance that we get information that causes us to find that person or someone or that household to be ineligible, and then they will get a closure date with that notice of eligibility. So that was our very, very quick recap of renewals and some things that are new. And I know you will all have a lot of questions, so I'm going to stop right now and we will take a look at that.